I never thought a group chat could destroy someone. But that's exactly what happened to me on a Tuesday night in March, when my own family turned my worst moment into their entertainment. It started with what felt like dying. That's the only way I can describe a panic attack to someone who's never had one. Your chest closes up, your heart pounds so hard you're sure it's going to burst, and your mind spirals into this dark place where you're convinced you're either having a heart attack or losing your sanity, maybe both. I was alone in my apartment in Denver, 28 years old, sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 in the morning. The attack had come out of nowhere while I was brushing my teeth. One minute I was getting ready for bed. The next I was gasping for air, shaking uncontrollably, completely convinced I was about to die. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone, but I managed to text my sister Emma. Having panic attack, can't breathe, so scared. Emma was the one person in my family I thought I could trust. We'd always been close, or at least I thought we were. She was 3 years older, lived in Chicago with her husband, and had this way of making me feel like everything would be okay when life got overwhelming. Her response came back quickly. "Oh no, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" I typed back with shaking fingers. "Don't know what to do, feel like I'm dying." "You're going to be fine," she wrote. "These things pass. Try to breathe slowly. I'm here." For the next hour, Emma talked me through it over text. She reminded me of breathing techniques, told me to focus on 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch. Slowly, very slowly, the attack began to subside. My heart rate came down, the crushing weight on my chest lifted. "Thank you," I texted her when I finally felt human again. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "That's what sisters are for," she replied. "I love you. Get some sleep." I fell asleep that night feeling grateful. Grateful to have someone who cared, someone who would sit with me in my darkest moment without judgment. I thought Emma had saved me. I had no idea she was already planning to betray me. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mom. 17. My stomach dropped before I even listened to the voicemails. "Jessica, what is wrong with you?" Her voice was sharp, annoyed. "Emma told me about your little episode last night. You can't keep doing this drama queen act every time something doesn't go your way. Call me back." Drama queen act. Those words hit me like a slap. I called Emma immediately. "Did you tell Mom about last night?" "Well, yeah." Her tone was casual, like she was discussing the weather. "I was worried about you. I thought she should know. But I asked you not to tell anyone. That was private." "Jess, you're being dramatic. Mom's just concerned." There it was again. Dramatic. The word that had followed me my entire life. The weapon my family used whenever I showed any emotion that made them uncomfortable. I hung up and called my mom back. "There's my little drama queen," she said, before I could even say hello. "Feeling better today, ready to rejoin the real world?" "Mom, I had a panic attack. It was terrifying. I thought I was dying." "Oh, Jessica, you weren't dying. You just get yourself all worked up over nothing. You've always been like this, ever since you were little. Remember when you cried for 3 hours because your goldfish died? You've always been too sensitive." Too sensitive, another favorite phrase of theirs. This isn't about being sensitive. Panic attacks are a real medical condition. "If you say so, honey, maybe you should see someone about that. Get some medication or something. Anyway, I have to run. Your father and I are going to lunch with the Hendersons." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling this hollow ache in my chest. This wasn't how families were supposed to respond to someone's pain, was it? Where was the concern, the compassion? Where was the love? But this was nothing new. This was the family I'd grown up with. The family that had taught me early and often that my feelings didn't matter, that showing vulnerability was weakness, that needing support was just me being dramatic. My dad, Robert, was a successful lawyer who treated emotions like inconvenient interruptions to his perfectly ordered life. He'd never said "I love you" to any of his children, not once that I could remember. When I was 12 and came home crying because kids at school were bullying me, he told me to toughen up or get tougher friends. My mom, Patricia, was the queen of emotional manipulation disguised as motherly concern. She had this way of making everything about her, of turning your pain into her inconvenience. When I broke my arm in high school, she spent the entire hospital visit complaining about how this was going to ruin her book club schedule. And then there was Emma, my older sister, who I'd idolized growing up. Emma, who was beautiful and smart, and seemed to have our parents' approval in ways I never could. Emma, who I thought was my ally in our cold, emotionally sterile family. But Emma had her own relationship with cruelty. She'd learned early that the way to stay in our parents' good graces was to join them in dismissing me, to position herself as the normal one by pointing out how dramatic I was. My younger brother Marcus, 25, had perfected the art of staying invisible. He never took sides, never defended anyone, never rocked the boat. He was like a ghost in our family dynamic, present but never really there. 3 days after my panic attack, I got a text from my cousin Riley. Riley was Emma's age, my mom's sister's daughter, and someone I'd always considered a friend. "Hey, saw the group chat. Are you doing okay?" My blood went cold. "What group chat?" "Oh shit, I thought you knew." My hands started shaking again, the same way they had during the panic attack. "Riley, what group chat? What are you talking about?" She called me instead of texting back. "Jess, I'm so sorry, I thought you were in it. It's a family group chat with your parents, Emma, Marcus, and a bunch of us cousins. Your mom made it a few months ago." "And what exactly did you see about me?" Riley was quiet for a long moment. "Emma shared your texts from the other night, the ones from when you were having the panic attack." The world tilted. I felt like I was falling through space. "She shared my private texts?" "Yeah, and then, God, Jess, I'm so sorry. They all started making jokes about it. Your mom was saying stuff about how you've always been dramatic. Your dad made some comment about how you need therapy, and Emma was laughing about how you thought you were dying." I couldn't breathe. It was happening again, that crushing feeling in my chest. But this time, it wasn't a panic attack. This was something worse. This was betrayal so complete, so devastating, that my body didn't know how to process it. "Are you still there?" Riley asked. "What exactly did they say?" My voice sounded strange, distant. "I can't repeat it all. It was just mean, really mean. They were making fun of your messages, imitating the way you text when you're scared. Your dad said something about how you're almost 30 and still having temper tantrums. Emma was explaining to everyone how you were being dramatic as usual." I hung up and immediately called Emma. "Oh, hey Jess, what's up?" The casual tone in her voice, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of our entire extended family, made me want to scream. "You shared my texts in a group chat?" A pause. "Who told you about that?" "It doesn't matter who told me. You shared my private messages. Messages where I was begging for help, where I was terrified and vulnerable and trusting you." "Jess, you're overreacting. It was just family. Everyone was worried about you." "Worried?" Riley said you were all making jokes. She said you were imitating my texts and laughing. Another pause, longer this time. "Look, maybe some people made light comments, but that's just how we deal with stress in our family. You know that. We use humor to cope." "Humor? You think mocking someone's panic attack is humor?" "You're being way too sensitive about this. It wasn't that serious." There it was again, too sensitive. The phrase that had been used to silence me my entire life. "Emma, I trusted you. When I was at my lowest point, my most vulnerable moment, I reached out to you for help, and you turned it into entertainment. That's not what happened." "Then what did happen?" Explain to me how sharing someone's panic attack texts in a group chat, and then making fun of them is anything other than cruelty. "I shared them because I was concerned, and if people made jokes, that's not my fault. That's just their sense of humor." "You participated, Emma. Riley said you were laughing too." Silence. "I have to go," Emma finally said. "Mike's calling me for dinner." She hung up. I sat on my couch staring at nothing, trying to understand what had just happened to my life. The people I thought loved me, the people I thought I could count on, had taken my deepest pain and turned it into a punchline. They had violated my privacy, mocked my suffering, and then acted like I was the problem for being upset about it. Over the next few days, I learned more about the group chat through Riley, who felt terrible about the whole thing and kept updating me on what was being said. The chat was called Family Updates and had been active for months. They shared photos, made plans, talked about their lives. Normal family stuff, except I wasn't in it. I had been deliberately excluded from my own family's group chat, They've been planning things without you, Riley told me during one of our calls. Birthday parties, holiday gatherings, vacation planning. Your mom keeps saying it's easier this way because you're always so emotional about family events. So not only had they mocked my panic attack, but I was discovering that my family had been having a parallel relationship without me for months. Making decisions that affected me, talking about me, planning around me, all while pretending to my face that everything was normal. I confronted my mom about it. "Oh, that little group chat," she said dismissively. "That's just for coordinating family stuff. You wouldn't be interested in all those boring details. You planned Marcus's birthday party in there. I found out about it 3 days before from Riley." "Well, you were invited, weren't you?" "Mom, you planned a surprise party for my brother and didn't include me in the planning. I showed up not knowing it was supposed to be a surprise. I almost ruined it." "You worry too much about these things, Jessica. You're always looking for reasons to be upset." "I'm upset because my family has a secret group chat where you plan things without me and mock me when I'm having medical emergencies." "Medical emergencies?" She laughed. Actually laughed. "Honey, having a little anxiety attack is not a medical emergency. You really need to get some perspective." That conversation broke something in me. Not the angry, explosive kind of breaking, where you shout and slam doors. The quiet kind. The kind where something inside you just stops. I stopped calling them, stopped texting, stopped showing up to family events unless specifically invited. And even then, I started making excuses, but they didn't seem to notice. In fact, based on what Riley told me, the group chat became even more active with stories about how I was being moody and distant and going through one of my phases. "Your mom keeps saying you're punishing everyone because you didn't get your way about something," Riley reported. "She's telling people you're being childish." They had created a narrative where I was the villain in my own story, where my hurt was manipulation, my boundaries were punishment, my silence was immaturity. 2 months after the panic attack incident, my grandfather died. Papa Joe had been the one person in my family who truly understood me, who never called me dramatic or too sensitive. He was my mom's father, 87 years old, and one of the kindest people I'd ever known. I found out about his death from a Facebook post. My own grandfather had died, and no one in my family had called to tell me. I immediately called my mom. "Oh, Jessica, I was going to call you. We've just been so busy with arrangements." "When did he die?" "Yesterday morning, peaceful, in his sleep. The funeral is Thursday." "Yesterday morning? Mom, it's Tuesday night. He died more than 24 hours ago and no one told me?" "Like I said, we've been busy, and honestly, we weren't sure if you'd want to be involved, given how you've been acting lately." How I'd been acting, like wanting basic respect was some kind of character flaw. Of course I want to be involved. He was my grandfather. "Well, you haven't exactly been participating in family events recently, because you've been excluding me from family planning and mocking me in group chats." "There you go again, making everything about you. Your grandfather just died, Jessica. Can't you put aside your little grievances for once?" My little grievances. That's what she called the systematic emotional abuse and exclusion I'd been experiencing. I went to the funeral, of course. I sat in the back, cried quietly for the man who had always made me feel loved and accepted, and listened to my family give speeches about the importance of family bonds and unconditional love. The irony was suffocating. After the service, during the gathering at my parents' house, I overheard Emma talking to our Aunt Linda. "We're all worried about Jess," Emma was saying. "She's been so distant lately. Ever since she had that panic attack, she's been acting like we did something wrong. I think she needs professional help." I walked away before I could hear more. I couldn't trust myself to stay calm if I had to listen to Emma rewrite history, painting herself as the concerned sister while I was the unstable one who needed fixing. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done. Done trying to explain myself to people who refused to understand. Done begging for basic human decency from people who seemed incapable of providing it. Done accepting crumbs of affection from people who treated me like an inconvenience. I wrote a letter, not an angry letter, not a dramatic letter, just a clear, honest letter explaining how their actions had affected me and what I needed going forward. I told them about the impact of sharing my private messages. I explained how being excluded from family planning made me feel unwanted and unimportant. I described the pattern of dismissing my emotions and calling me dramatic whenever I expressed hurt or disappointment. I didn't ask for apologies. I didn't demand changes. I simply explained that I would be taking a break from family relationships until I could figure out how to protect my mental health while still maintaining connections with people who seemed determined to minimize my worth. I sent the letter to my parents, Emma and Marcus. The responses were exactly what I expected. My dad: "This letter is overly emotional and unfair. We've always supported you. If you can't appreciate that, that's your problem." My mom: "I'm disappointed in you, Jessica. Family is supposed to stick together through everything. You're choosing to hold grudges instead of moving forward." Emma: "I can't believe you wrote this. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? You're being incredibly selfish." Marcus didn't respond at all. Not one of them acknowledged my feelings. Not one of them showed any understanding of how their actions had hurt me. Instead, they all focused on how my letter made them feel, how unfair I was being to them, how I was the one causing problems. It was like a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Take someone's pain, turn it around, and make them the villain for expressing it. But something had shifted in me since writing that letter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scrambling to fix things, to make them feel better, to prove that I wasn't the terrible person they were making me out to be. I was done with that dance. Riley called me a week later. "The group chat is going crazy," she said. "Your mom is telling everyone that you've cut off the family over nothing. She's saying you're having some kind of breakdown and that they're all victims of your instability." "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think they're full of shit," Riley said, without hesitation. "I've been watching this family dynamic my whole life, Jess. The way they treat you isn't normal. The way they talk about you when you're not around isn't okay. What happened with your panic attack was cruel. And instead of acknowledging that, they're doubling down and making you the problem." Hearing someone else validate my reality was like oxygen to someone who'd been suffocating. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too sensitive," I admitted. "Jess, you had a medical emergency and reached out for help. Instead of supporting you, they mocked you and shared your private messages for entertainment. Then when you expressed hurt about it, they called you dramatic and excluded you even more. That's not you being too sensitive, that's them being emotionally abusive." Emotionally abusive. I'd never thought of it in those terms before, but hearing Riley say it out loud made something click into place. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen was a woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma and had this way of asking questions that made me examine my own assumptions about what I deserved. "Tell me about your earliest memory of being called dramatic," she said during one of our sessions. I thought back. I was probably 7 or 8. I had gotten excited about a school art project and was telling my parents about it at dinner. I was talking fast, using my hands, just being enthusiastic. My dad said, "Jessica, stop being so dramatic. It's just finger painting." How did that make you feel? Embarrassed, like my excitement was wrong somehow, like I was too much. And how often did that message get reinforced? I started counting in my head. Every time I cried at movies, every time I got upset about friend drama, every time I showed enthusiasm about anything, every time I expressed disappointment or hurt or fear, all the time I realized. Every emotional response I had was labeled as dramatic or too much or an overreaction. So what did you learn about your emotions? That they were wrong, that they were inconvenient, that I needed to hide them or tone them down to be acceptable. And what happens to someone who spends their whole life believing their emotions are wrong? I thought about this for a long moment. They stop trusting themselves. They start questioning whether their reactions are valid. They become easy to manipulate because they're always second-guessing their own reality. That's exactly right. And when someone finally starts trusting their emotions again, starts setting boundaries, starts saying this isn't okay, what do you think happens? The people who benefited from them being compliant get angry. They escalate their tactics. They try harder to convince them that they're the problem. Bingo. That session changed everything for me. I realized that my family's reaction to my letter wasn't evidence that I was wrong. It was evidence that I was finally right. I stayed away from family events for 6 months. I didn't call on birthdays. I didn't show up for holidays. I didn't respond to guilt-tripping messages about how I was destroying the family and breaking everyone's hearts. Instead, I focused on building a life that felt authentic to me. I made new friends who didn't call me dramatic when I showed emotion. I dated people who saw my sensitivity as a strength, not a flaw. I pursued hobbies and interests that made me excited without worrying about being too much. And slowly, very slowly, I started to remember who I was before I learned to shrink myself. The breaking point came at Christmas. My mom called me in December, her voice sweet and manipulative in that way I'd learned to recognize. "Jessica, honey, we need to talk about Christmas. The whole family is going to be at Emma's house in Chicago this year, and it won't be the same without you. I haven't decided if I'm coming to Christmas yet." "What do you mean you haven't decided? It's Christmas. You have to come." "Actually, I don't have to do anything. I'm an adult who gets to choose how to spend my holidays." Her tone shifted immediately. "Don't you dare use that therapy speak with me. I know you've been seeing someone, filling your head with ideas about how terrible your family is. My therapist doesn't tell me what to think about my family. She helps me trust my own feelings about my experiences." "Your experiences? You mean your overreactions and hurt feelings that you've blown completely out of proportion?" And there it was, the dismissal, the minimization, the refusal to acknowledge that anything they'd done could have possibly hurt me. "Mom, do you remember my panic attack in March?" "What about it?" "Do you remember how Emma shared my private messages in the family group chat and you all made fun of them?" A pause. "We didn't make fun of anything. We were concerned." "Riley was in that chat, Mom. She told me exactly what was said. You were imitating my texts and laughing about how dramatic I was being. Riley shouldn't have been talking to you about family business. So you're not denying that it happened." Another pause. "I don't remember every single conversation in that chat, Jessica. If some jokes were made, it was just people trying to lighten the mood. You're acting like we committed some kind of crime. You took my most vulnerable moment and turned it into entertainment. You shared my private messages without permission. You mocked me when I was genuinely terrified and asking for help. You weren't genuinely terrified. You were having one of your episodes. One of my episodes. Like my panic attacks were character flaws instead of medical symptoms. And then when I told you how much that hurt me, instead of apologizing, you made me out to be the villain. You excluded me even more. You told people I was being dramatic and holding grudges. Because you were." The simplicity of her response, the complete lack of empathy or understanding, hit me like a physical blow. "I'm not coming to Christmas," I said. "Jessica Marie, if you don't show up to Christmas, don't expect to be welcome back to this family." Is that a threat? It's a reality. Family means showing up even when it's hard. If you can't do that, then maybe you're not the kind of person we thought you were. I hung up. I spent Christmas Day alone in my apartment, and it was the most peaceful Christmas I'd had in years. I cooked myself a nice dinner, watched movies I actually wanted to watch, and didn't spend a single moment walking on eggshells or managing other people's emotions. But the real revelation came 2 days later, when Riley called me. "I need to tell you something about Christmas," she said, her voice heavy. "What happened?" "Your mom told everyone you decided not to come because you're going through a selfish phase and punishing the family for not enabling your dramatic behavior." I felt that familiar ache in my chest. But this time it was different. This time it was clarity. She said, "You've always been the problem child, and now you're trying to manipulate everyone by withdrawing and playing victim." She said the family is better off without your constant drama and emotional demands. Better off without me. My own mother had told my extended family that they were better off without me. "But here's the thing, Jess," Riley continued. "I stood up for you. I told them what actually happened with the panic attack texts. I told them how you'd been excluded from family planning and how cruel everyone had been to you." "What did they say?" "Your mom told me I didn't know what I was talking about and that I was being manipulated by your victim mentality. Emma said I was choosing sides and making family problems worse. Your dad said I needed to mind my own business. I'm sorry you got dragged into this." "I'm not sorry. Someone needed to tell the truth. And you know what? After I said all that, 3 other cousins came up to me privately and said they'd been thinking the same thing. That the way the family treats you isn't right, that they've noticed the pattern but never said anything because they didn't want to rock the boat. That conversation was a gift I didn't know I needed. Validation from people who had witnessed the same dynamics, but had been too afraid to speak up. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy, wasn't too sensitive, wasn't imagining the cruelty. I was seeing the situation clearly for the first time in my life. In January, Emma called me. It had been almost a year since the panic attack incident. "Jess, we need to talk. This family feud has gone on long enough." "This isn't a feud, Emma. This is me protecting myself from people who hurt me and refuse to acknowledge it. Look, maybe some things were said that shouldn't have been said. Maybe the group chat thing wasn't handled perfectly, but you can't stay mad forever. Maybe some things were said. Maybe it wasn't handled perfectly. This was as close to an admission of wrongdoing as I was ever going to get from my family. And it still wasn't an actual apology. I'm not mad, Emma. I'm done. There's a difference." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not going to keep putting myself in situations where I'm disrespected, mocked, and made to feel like my emotions are character flaws. It means I'm not going to keep begging for basic human decency from people who seem incapable of providing it." "So you're just going to cut us all off forever?" "I'm going to prioritize relationships with people who treat me with kindness and respect. If that doesn't include biological family, then so be it." That's incredibly selfish. And there it was again, selfish. Because wanting to be treated well was selfish. Because having boundaries was selfish. Because refusing to accept abuse was selfish. If protecting my mental health is selfish, then I guess I'm selfish. Mom and Dad are heartbroken, you know. They don't understand what they did wrong. They don't understand because they don't want to understand. I wrote them a letter explaining exactly what hurt me and why. Instead of listening, they made it about how unfair I was being to them. Maybe you could try again, explain it differently. "Emma, I shouldn't have to beg people to treat me with basic respect. I shouldn't have to explain why mocking someone's panic attack is cruel. I shouldn't have to convince my own family that my feelings matter." She was quiet for a long moment. "I miss you," she finally said. And for just a second, she sounded like the sister I thought I had. "I miss who I thought you were, too." That was the last conversation I had with Emma. It's been 3 years now since I walked away from my family. 3 years of holidays spent with friends who've become my chosen family. 3 years of building relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. 3 years of not having to justify my emotions or apologize for taking up space. People always ask if I regret it, if I miss them, if I think I'll ever reconcile. The truth is, I do miss them sometimes, but I miss the fantasy of who I wanted them to be, not who they actually were. I miss the idea of having a loving, supportive family, not the reality of being emotionally abused and then gaslit into believing I was the problem. I've learned that some people are only capable of loving you as long as you don't ask them to change any behavior that hurts you. They'll love you as long as you accept whatever treatment they're willing to give, no matter how inadequate or harmful it might be. But real love doesn't require you to shrink yourself. Real love doesn't call you dramatic for having feelings. Real love doesn't mock your pain or share your private moments for entertainment. My therapist asked me recently what I would tell my younger self, the little girl who learned that her emotions were too much. I would tell her that her feelings are valid, that her excitement and sadness and fear and joy all have value. That people who truly love her will want to understand her emotions, not silence them. I would tell her that she doesn't need to earn love by being smaller, quieter, less complicated. That the right people will love her not despite her sensitivity, but because of it. And I would tell her that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who are determined to misunderstand you. That panic attack in March changed my life, but not in the way my family intended. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about being dramatic. Instead, they taught me something far more valuable. They taught me the difference between people who support you in your darkest moments and people who turn your darkness into light entertainment for themselves. And now I know which kind of people deserve access to my life.